A lot of people that have reviewed this one say how much they love the moulded textured glass design on this one. I don't hate it. Hello and welcome back. We're continuing our odyssey of new distillery releases today, and the next one up is the Isle of Raasay. So this is one that I've had for a little while. It was one of the first ones that I bought when I was doing this series of new reviews, which has now taken an absolute age to finish. So this is possibly an old release now. This is the Isle of Raasay RO2. So this is, I think, their sort of second official release. And as a lot of people have said, people seem to really like this moulded glass design. They've got a little fossil of an ammonite in there, sort of playing that the part of Scotland that this whisky is from is a very ancient and almost primeval part of the coastline, packed full of history and heritage, that sort of thing. Now, I do think that this moulded glass design with the texture, the rock, sort of suggesting that this whisky comes from the place, directly from the rock, the ground, the history itself. I think that it's definitely unique and striking, which is almost certainly the point. I'm not completely sold on it. It's a little bit modern, a little bit tacky for my liking. What I do love about this one though is the label. I think that the label is beautiful, traditional label wrapping around half of the bottle and a bit of the back there, and it's got so much information on it, all the information you could possibly want. So Isle of Raasay Distillery is obviously a Scottish distillery. They were founded in 2014, and this RO2 release is really made up of 6 parts. So the spirit that goes into this release from Raasay, it's half peated, half unpeated, and those two halves of the whisky are both matured in a combination of American ex-rye casks, Chinkapin oak casks, and Bordeaux red wine casks. We know that the Isle of Raasay uses 100% Highland peat, 100% Scottish barley, and they mature all of their casks on site. The obvious question is, what is Chinkapin oak? Well, you're probably not the only one wondering that. It's basically just another variety of North American oak. So basically a variation on the usual American white oak that we're all very familiar with. Isle of Raasay are just deciding to get a little bit exotic with their woods. So moving on to the details on the label, the Isle of Raasay, like most of these new distilleries, they're going full craft. So this is natural colour, it's non-chill filtered, it's 46.4%, it's a full craft integrity presentation. It does seem like these new distilleries, for whatever reason, they just find it so much easier to not pollute their whisky and offer it at a proper strength without watering it down and without chill filtration. It just seems like it's so much easier for them to give us what we actually want, as opposed to these distilleries that have supposedly been doing it for a couple of 100 years that still haven't figured it out. Strange that. Seriously though, as I've said before, one of the great things about almost all of these new distilleries is that they all offer a good ABV and a really good presentation. Good, honest whisky. They're really putting the time and love and craft and dedication into making the best product that they possibly can. What I do dislike about this release from Raasay though is the box. Just going to put the bottle back in there. I don't know about you guys, but this is something that I've always hated. If a whisky needs a box at all, and with something like this, it's a very talked about and very well liked expression from a new distillery. So some people will buy this to keep it on their shelf, either to flip it or because they want to open this in the future and compare it to the stuff they come out with further down the line. But if you are going to put whisky in a box, it should at least offer some protection. And a box with a massive hole in it doesn't offer a lot of protection from knocks or sunlight or dust or anything at all. So obviously they're not the first people to do this. My local, the English Whisky Company, they used to have massive holes in all of their boxes. They've stopped doing that now. Springbank, Holy of Holies, Springbank used to have massive holes in the bottom half of their boxes. They've stopped doing it as well. But yeah, in my opinion, if a box is going to have a massive hole in it, it might as well not exist at all. Anyway, let's get it back out of the useless box. Let's get the bottle that I moaned about. I do like the label, I do like the presentation of this one. But let's see what it's like where it matters. Let's get some in the glass and see what we've got. So, Isle of Raasay RO2 on the nose. Dry, salty, smoky peat. So pleased to say that that peat that they've used for half of the spirit that goes into this is definitely showing. It's not one of these whiskies that is advertised as peated and you can't find it. It's definitely there. Slight farminess to the peat as well, but very salty. And when I say salty, it's not really even that maritime brininess that you get on something like an Old Pulteney or a Talisker. It's just almost pure salt. Salty, toasted oak, and a little bit of a savoury, slightly cheesy, fermentation-like quality, which I'm wondering might be coming through from a long fermentation time, or probably more likely, probably just a combination of those salty, briny characteristics mixed with some savoury notes coming through from that Bordeaux red wine. Also getting a little bit of oak spice coming through, a little bit of a cinnamon oak spice note, and some salty red fruit notes, which again is almost certainly coming through from that Bordeaux cask. I think that the peat and the red wine on this, that grape influence, that juicy red fruits note, it has something of a little bit of an Ugadal quality to it, but I would say that this is younger and a bit more raw. Let's see how it tastes. So the colour of that one, we obviously know that it's completely natural. We know that this is a fairly young whiskey. So the colour of this one's almost certainly coming through from those new oak casks and those Bordeaux wine casks. On the palate, getting lots of notes of dark fruits, a little bit of a wine gum note, which is something that in a new distillery, young whiskey, I'd quite often associate with an STR cask. They haven't used STR casks in this one. They're one of the few new distilleries that haven't gone down that route, because it's very popular now for young whiskies. So that wine gum note is almost certainly coming through again from that Bordeaux cask. Also getting some virgin oak notes, some wood spice, which is probably coming through from those Chinkapin casks. I think that this is a whiskey which is lightly planky, but I'm pleased to say that it's not overly wood spicy. Only a very small hint of peppery wood spice on this one. Some more saltiness coming through on the palate. I'd actually say like salted, smoky fish. A little bit of a sour, fruity grapefruit note. And a dry grassiness, which I suspect might be coming through from that American ex-rye cask. All through the palate of this whiskey, you've got that presence of the peat though, which is a really nice, farmy, salty peat. It's going to have one more sip and look at the finish. So as for a finish, medium long, a little bit simple, which you probably expect for a whiskey of this age, but more of that lovely salty oak with a touch of dry farmy peat. So without beating about the bush, this is a fantastic young whiskey. Really pleased with this early effort from the Isle of Raasay distillery. I think the combination of the youth, the raw oak, the saltiness and the smoky farmy peat on this one is probably how I would imagine it would be if we had a peated Nuckneen. Now, a few of you have seen my video for what is this? Nuckneen Organic. I can't remember what batch this is, but the video is there. And when I did that video, I actually got some replies from Nuckneen, and I asked them if they would do a peated release. And sadly, they said no, because they're all about being sustainable and environmentally friendly at Nuckneen. And they said that to take a natural carbon sink and to burn that and release that carbon into the atmosphere is very much against what they stand for. So we're unlikely to see a peated Nuckneen, but I imagine that this Isle of Raasay is probably something along the lines of what you would get there. And I'm pleased to say that this Isle of Raasay is surprisingly peated for what they actually call themselves a lightly peated malt. I'd say that this has got more peat than a Bowmore, and it's surprisingly not overwhelmingly immature for such a young malt. but it does have lots of salty, raw intensity. It's definitely a bold whisky, and I'm really interested to see where this will go after a bit more maturation. As Jeff at G Whisky would say, this one definitely has testicular fortitude, and I think you probably need a little bit of testicular fortitude to drink this one and fully appreciate it. It's certainly very salty, very oaky, and a lovely little whisky with lots of presence and intensity. But I think what I love most of all about this whisky from the Isle of Raasay is not the intensity or the peat or anything like that, it's the balance. I think that especially for such a young whisky, this is really a masterclass in balancing cask types. We know that you've got peated and unpeated spirit in there, and they're from 3 very different cask types, with the rye cask, the chinkapin, and the Bordeaux cask. And in particular, the fact that they've foregone the inclusion of first fill bourbon casks, which has really become the standard in modern Scotch whisky, is a very apparent and bold and potentially risky move, which I think has worked really well. And I think the fact that none of the 3 casks that they've used really dominate or cover up the influence from the other casks, that it all plays together so nicely, is really a testament to the fact that the people at Isle of Raasay really know what they're doing. They're not just throwing things together and seeing what happens. I think that they are very good at their job. They've been very clever about this one, and it makes me very optimistic about what they come out with in future. As for a grade, I'm going to give this one a C+. So that's at the top end of what I would call good, just below very good. So where does that put us? Kind of have to look at a bit of a leaderboard here. I'm reluctant to do this because I don't want any of these new distilleries to come out last, because they're all really good. They're all doing a really good job of what they're doing. But I think I've given all 3 of these a C+ so far. So they're all about the same. I would say though that I think the Nickneen is going to be our benchmark. That's our normal, our reference. I like the Loch Lee a little bit more than the Nickneen. And I think out of these 2, it's really too close to call. I think these 2 are being dangerous here. But these 2 are going to have to be neck and neck. I think that they're very, very different whiskies. You've got a lovely, sharp, fruity, typically lowland style whiskey here. This one is probably very typically island, which is just as well because it is an island distillery. But I think that anyone that enjoys other island distilleries, in particular things like better releases from Jura or Talisker, things like that, if those are your favourite whiskies and you don't mind giving a young whisky a chance, this is something that you'll really enjoy. In particular, I just really like how that oak spice coming through from the rye cask and the chinkapin, you would assume, adds a really nice dimension. As I've said a million times before, I do think that virgin oak has a habit of adding too much wood spice. It can cover up a lot of youth, often intentionally, but that virgin oak influence often adds a lot of ginger and raw spicy oak notes, but this really works so much better. And I do wonder that if a lot of that is either because they've chosen extremely good casks, or if it's down to that chinkapin oak. That very pleasant oakiness that you get in this reminds me a little bit of, just in particular, the oaky quality that you get in Ardbeg Corryvreckan, the way that Corryvreckan uses that, I believe, French European oak to such a really good effect, where it adds another dimension without overpowering the whiskey. Same kind of experience with this one. I just think that this is a really well made and really cleverly made young whisky from a new distillery, and if they continue along these lines, I can see them doing really great things over at Raasay. So let me know what you think of this one in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.